Welcome to another episode of the ADHD Families Podcast. I'm your host, Sharon Collin, and I am so happy you are here. Today we have an absolute cracker of an episode. We're talking about teenagers. Now, I receive so many questions about teens, and as a mum of a teenager myself, it is such an interesting developmental stage. When you have a teenager with ADHD, often the lines get a bit blurry for us. What's ADHD? What's standard teenage behaviour? It all gets a bit confusing. So I brought in the incredible Maggie Dent. There's no introduction needed for Maggie. You guys know who she is. But I'm going to let you know anyway because I think she's pretty amazing. She is the queen of common sense. She's one of Australia's favourite parenting authors, educators and podcasters. She is the author of 10 incredible books, including her most recent one, Help Me, Help My Teen. And she is the host of the Good Enough Dad podcast, which we discuss in this episode. And she's hosted 6 seasons of the award-winning ABC podcast, Parental as Anything. She is a mother of 4 sons and a grateful grandma. Now, in this episode, we talk about teenage behaviours. We talk about connection and maintaining connection. We discuss what to do when it all goes a little bit pear-shaped. There's risky behaviours and some interesting choices that happen in this age bracket and what we can do as parents to support our gorgeous kids. There is so much gold in this episode. So if you have a teen or a tween that's about to go through these teenage years, you want to listen to this and get the practical takeaways. Let's get to it. Welcome to the ADHD Families Podcast. I'm your host, Sharon Collin, an award-winning credentialed ADHD coach and consultant and mama and wife to a very ADHD family. I am seriously obsessed with making life easier for people with ADHD and those that support them. My business, The Functional Family, provides life-changing support and strategies for ADHD. I particularly love anything that saves time, decreases conflict, and creates space for fun. Do you want a life with your beautiful family that is more functional, fun, and full of joy? Let's explore together the wonderful and sometimes wacky world of family life with ADHD in the mix. Welcome, Maggie. I am so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Sharon, it's an absolute delight for me as well. And I bless the stars that we crossed our paths as we did a couple of times last year. And I thank you for the work you're doing because it is so needed.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, I've got so many great questions. I've really thought about this because I want to really honour your time and give our beautiful listeners the best experience possible because we all adore you. And can you tell me a little bit before we get into those about how you got to where you are? Like, what is the motivation behind your business and your farm?
So I was born on a wheat and sheep farm in Western Australia on the 5th of 6th. And so I think I learnt about navigating, life quite deeply early on. And all of us kids were a part of everything from bushfires to droughts to, catching yabbies and fighting with siblings. So when I went to school, I loved school, went off to uni and I was going to do journalism and had a big life change in the middle of it all and teaching. I just wanted to go back in the classroom because I'd had a few fabulous teachers. And in that journey, and then I went on an intensive breeding program, as you know, and have 4 sons. So I kind of had 7 years sort of at home, but also, kindy president and volunteer in the classroom. And, it's not really at home. And then when I went back, again, I was just blown away with the increasing fragility of teenagers and the increase in stress. And so after a while, I decided I'd become a counsellor. So I did a postgrad diploma, counselled full-time, and then accidentally ran a few little seminars for parents to help them because they all had teenagers and they all said I made a lot of sense, so it's their fault. And then being an old English teacher, one day I did have a burnout. I had to have a couple of months off because I tried to see everybody on earth. And I wrote a book and then I haven't sort of stopped. Well, I have stopped now, Sharon. I've written my 10th and final book. And then the other part of my journey was no one was really doing parent seminars in schools. And so I floated the idea. And then that's become a thing, as you now know. And then the other thing is I always wanted to be an ABC news reader because the only thing on the farm, we didn't have TV, we had ABC radio. And so along came the ABC Parental as Anything podcast, and I thought, well, that's using, I could be on the radio. Anyway, and so that's led me off because I love the podcast. And then, of course, I fell in love with the idea of a podcast for dads. So then we did the Good Enough Dad one. So it's a crazy journey that you could not vision from the beginning. But I think I'm pretty sure all of the early stuff prepared me for what I do today.
That beautiful sequence of growth. And, one of the things that I absolutely adore about you, and, we've met in person and done a few things together, is that you've got this beautiful down-to-earth nature. You really inspire people and lift people up, but when I see you speak, you deliver something that can be a little bit hard-hitting, like a fact, but then you follow it up with a bit of humour. And that just softens it and makes it so palatable for people, because nothing is more triggering than parenting and your own children.
And that's why I refuse to have the word expert tagged to me, because I'm now a nanny of 8 precious grandchildren and I'm still buggering up. So no one's nailing it, Sharon. And I think this world has become so hard on parents. Like, it's very judgy. And people have different views, but because of the online world, people get attacked more, or they think they should do. They think there's a perfect solution. And that's why one of the first things I started chatting on Nova Radio in Perth at one point, and I had parents ring up and say, so how do I stop my 2-year-old from having tantrums? And I went, no, that's exactly what 2-year-olds are supposed to be doing. They're developing beautifully. And there's this stunned silence going, what? And so that's the normalising. Every stage of growth and development will give us a challenge, but it also gives us a gift of some kind. So I hope I can decode that a lot for parents, because every day is a different day, hey?
So we're going to chat about teens today. I'm really going to narrow in on that. Well, selfishly, a little bit for me, because I have a teenager. And it's really interesting for our audience, and talking to other families that also have teens, because when you have ADHD in the family, we have this natural boundary pushing and oppositional behaviour. But now you throw teenage life into that, and the line becomes blurred about what's normal teenage behaviour and what is ADHD. So we all get a bit like confused, like, what should we do? So I'm really curious about some of your, to ask you some questions about teens. So we know that, first I'm going to start about connection, because I think this is so important. And we always say with ADHD that we lead with connection. We always lead, I mean with all children, but it's particularly important when we're talking about children with RSD and rejection sensitivity dysphoria and feeling like they're getting a lot of negative feedback from the world. We know that our teens naturally pull away from us during this developmental stage. How can parents build or maintain a strong relationship with their teens? Because I'm telling you right now, I'm feeling like it's intense.
I want to start with one kind of gift in a way of already having an ADHD teen, because suddenly everyone else's kid's now doing what yours has been doing all along. Does that make sense?
Yes.
They're all going, oh my gosh, and you're going, oh, you're only just experiencing it. One of the key things is exactly that. How do I maintain that relationship? Because what happens in this window is how you parented up to, and sometimes it's tween, sometimes the sass comes in earlier. The tween window is you have to start changing the way that you do parent, because you now have an emerging independent human who's got a fair way to go, but to them, they're wiring to push back. They're wiring for more autonomy. They're wiring to want to be heard and seen for who they are. They're also getting a sense of who am I, identity kind of stuff. And so that's why I'm so passionate about, I accidentally was a great teacher for the ADHD kids in my classrooms, because I love movement. My brain doesn't work without movement. So I was the teacher with more brain breaks than anybody on earth. And I just was quite comfortable if kids walked around as long as they finished. I didn't care if they lay on the floor to write their essay. So I guess in a way, I made that environment, but not all, So the kids who are being forced into things that are difficult for them to do, particularly our boys, will struggle. And our biggest challenge at home is that we have to keep validating. It's not just that you may have ADHD. It is this bumpy ride that every young person goes on. Every young person is going to experience highs, massive, crazy, euphoric moments where they think they can jump off tall buildings. They're going to experience incredible confusion, swirling big emotions, the intensity increases. And of course, the other part is the more prepared that our tweens are to what's coming, the better. So I urge every single, parent who's got a tween or a teen, if you can, I've got lots of blogs online. You don't even have to buy my books. But if you've got a boy, From Boys to Men will give you really specifics, because when the boy knows that his brain is likely to do some more pruning, which can impact his memory and his organisation skills, which he's already struggling with, he then has an idea that is what's going to happen. So when he's left the backpack on the bus with the Mac Air and his phone, he won't attack himself quite so harshly, because you're going to validate. Remember the brain pruning? Okay, we'll just track it down. We'll get it. So in other words, we don't come in with shame. When we don't come in with, oh, what do you think you're doing? We remind them that all teens, but mainly our boys, struggle in that area. Girls don't seem to struggle as much with organisation skills, Sharon, or memory. I very rarely experienced a classroom where girls would say, oh, I didn't know it was due today. So they're also in the high school environment, Sharon, and I think we've got to recognise it's a volatile place for boys, because every teacher is different with different expectations, and that really confuses boys. So when I was counselling them, sometimes we'd have to actually, problem solve each teacher. We'd actually look at which were the classes they were challenging the most, and let's look at, okay, so that works with those teachers. What can we try with this teacher that, might be a little different, so that we actually, together, we're going to help them work out how to navigate the difficulties that can be every single teenager can be having in the classroom. So I think it's the reassurance. They know that you've got their back and they're on their side. And I think it's that same thing every now and then. Every teen, will make poor choices. But our boys are biologically wired to make more risky choices. So when that happens, we swoop in with so much love so that they know when they need a trip to ED. And I had a lot of those, that whoever it is, and Dad used to get super angry, so he was no good at all. They'd always come to Mum and I'd go, quick, wrap that up, let's go. They just knew that no matter what, that their mum was going to be there for them, no matter how crazy the decision was. And I think that's the message. And I've put a beautiful couple of posters up on my website, Sharon, with no matter what, and I reckon every parent needs it on the wall of their teenagers. Just know, if anything goes wrong, anything happens, no matter what, you call Mum or call Dad or whoever it is, we're going to be there for you. And one day, your brain's going to grow, you're going to finish maturing, and you're not going to need us as much. But I'm going to tell you, it's still no matter what. That anchors that sense of safety that I'm talking about, that sense of connection. And there are going to be times you've got to practice an unshockable face, right? The unshockable face. Go and look in the mirror, particularly Dad goes to anger, Mum goes to, ah! So practice the unshockable face. And I'd like to land that last question was, there was a beautiful ADHD boy I was working with who was, he was right out there and he was highly social. And he was highly into doing crazy things. And one day he had an appointment with me and he came in and he was dragging his feet and he looked really shattered. And I said, what on earth is happening? He said, I graffitied the deputy principal's car. And I said, and he said, yeah, because he shamed me in front of everybody. And I thought, you're a nerd, I'm going to, but he graffitied it with his name. And only someone who can really understand, our neurodivergent kids could hold that boy and let him cry. Finally, he found somewhere safe he could have a good cry about. He could not believe how stupid he'd been. But once again, picking him back up and knowing that, at the end of the day, he's still worthwhile and he's still a good human. That was all my job was, and the snot on my shoulder.
It's that beautiful unconditional regard. Like I often say to our beautiful community, like, we're not Santa. We don't just show up for good behavior, right? Like, Santa sees you when you're good, whatever. We're not like that.
I hate that.
Yeah, I know. I hate that too. I crossed all that bit out. We show up for the good, the bad, the ugly. Like, we just show up, right?
That's it.
And that's what they need. Now, this can be tricky when our kids are swearing at us. Some of our kids are aggressive. Some of our kids have, lots of things that are going on that are very, very intense. And for a lot of parents, it is more about us regulating than it is helping our child regulate.
Because there's no question.
No
question. And that's a really big one, is that if you can explain it through the face that if they're bringing home that intense cortisol-charged, highly dysregulated energy and bringing it inside the home, and maybe they're landing it on you, that is actually a sign of just how safe you are and how loved you are. And I know you just want to go, I wish it wasn't like that. And our job is literally not to take it personally. So two of the things I recommend in that space is water off a duck's back, right? Water off a duck's back. I'm just the duck. So pretend you're a duck and try even not to listen to it, because the intensity of those words is actually their way of discharging the deepest of their angst, confusion, frustration, hurt, shame, right? The voice gives it out. And sometimes, when it's a physical thing, which a lot of boys go to, that can be really scary. So when they're not in the dysregulated state, we might find a time where we can say, what else can you do? Right? Can we, if there's no, boxing bag at home, because some people think that increases their chances of becoming violent. It actually doesn't. Or run it into the earth, right? Or go and have a shower. Got to help them work out what can help me with that intensity, because it's scary for them. They don't have the cognitive capacity to go, gee whiz, I need to take some steps to calm my nervous system. Right? And the second one is water off a duck's back. The second one is this movement where you just go like this, and it's the same sort of thing. As it comes at me, bend your knees and let it go. And then even, you'll notice there's a massive shift of it. If we buy into the storm, then it lasts twice as long. So with me, I had one pretty volatile lad, words-wise. Very words-wise. And I know that as he got a little older, I'd sometimes pause in them and say, I don't think you meant to say that like that. Do you want a do-over? But that's if you can hear it de-escalating. Or sometimes they've dumped it all, gone to their room, slammed the door. Great. And that's why, one of the most popular reels that I've done, over doing Help Me, Help My Teen, the book, was saying that I always allowed it around 20 minutes for the glitter to settle. So keep an idea of a glitter jar. When it's all shook up, there's no logic, no access to prefrontal. It's flip the lid with Dan Siegel. Mm-hmm. When that settles, okay, that's when we can reconnect or do something great. And I said kindness is your most powerful weapon, even though everything in your head is saying, I don't deserve to be spoken to that disrespectfully, and I'm going to ground you and gate you for the rest of your life. That actually just makes it worse, and they don't learn from it. So I would, 20 minutes, knock on the door, pause, open the door gently, just pop in a cup of Milo, a Tim Tam or a Bicky, shove the dog in and shut the door. In other words, no verbal thing. And this is mainly, and it can work for girls. Apparently, I just thought it was boys, but there have been some girls, they don't necessarily want a Tim Tam, but whatever their favourite drink is, whatever their favourite thing is, you'll know what it is. And then what it is as they're calming down, Sharon, they are feeling, she hasn't abandoned me. I'm still loved. I'm going to be okay, or we're going to be okay. And, the more you practice it, the more easily it comes, and the more likely that, once again, you'll get a mumbled sorry, or you'll get a hug, or you'll get, you'll know they've come back to you, because they can't control those things at the best of times, but in the intensity of what's going on in high schools, it's big.
And it almost feels like when we're dysregulated ourselves, obviously watching our child dysregulate, we get dysregulated. And dysregulation loves action, right? It feels like we should move. We should be jumping in, and we should be talking, and we should be like, but really,
no, it's the opposite.
Yeah, those dysregulated moments are not teachable
space.
moments.
Yeah.
We can't get them to learn anything when they're like
I had a lovely chair in the garden. I spent a lot of time on it when that little fiery boy was sort of 13 to 15. And I'd go out there with the dog, sometimes with a cup of tea. And it's really interesting as the years tick by that sometimes I would find that same boy on that chair. Because it's not all necessarily about the words, because it's beyond words at times. It means their nervous system has just flipped, and that's one of our biggest challenges is what do they do in that moment? And we also know there's a difference in, the amygdala, how it responds between girls and boys, and that girls tend to, the second part of the brain that fires up when they're really upset is the word centre. Mm-hmm. And for boys, it's the body. So quite often they're incapable of talking. And sometimes going for a walk or shoot some hoops or just jump on the trampoline, and then a little while later maybe we may be able to access the word centre. And I think we just misjudge that. And as mums, we want to get onto it. We want to sort it. We want to go through it. And intuitively, that makes sense. But in actual fact, what will work best is leaving it and even approaching it a couple of days later. I'm just really worried with, how upset you were the other day. Yeah, I'm worried or I'm curious. Yeah.
I often say like some of my worst parenting moments have been when I have done it for the benefit of other people. So like you're in the shopping center and like everyone's losing it and you feel that judgment eye and then you come in with something that's nothing to do with what's best for your family. It's just because you feel the pressure.
We've all been there, hey?
Yeah.
So my 3 C's around teenagers, if you can, is the first one is find your own calm. You've got to go calmness first. Second one is curiosity because, half the time they have no idea. Right? And there could have been something that happened at lunchtime that's been brewing ever since. Has nothing to do with you, nothing to do with the family, nothing to do with the teacher who you assumed it was, but something else has hurt them and upset them. And it's a tipping point in teens. Like a lot of things can happen, but the last thing, and the good news is that when you've had the major flip, it tends to calm the nervous system a bit. And then the last thing is just compassion. It's a bumpy ride in a crazy, crazy world. It wasn't easy for you, but the more we hold those 3 C's in our mind, the more our kids will pick it up as well. Yeah.
Love that so much. So we know kids with ADHD can make some very interesting choices in this developmental stage. What role does empathy play with teenagers, and how can we show it? When they're making these really intense, like I always say to my kids, there's no mistake that you can't come back from. Like we can fail spectacularly and still get back up, right? But sometimes you just like, what? Like I don't say this to them, but I'm like, what was that about? Oh my goodness. How did you think that was going to play out? They're just making, because of that poor impulse control, but also this developmental stage, when they're making these really interesting choices, how can we lead with empathy?
Look, I think it's what do we say sometimes when we get to know about it? And for my favourite response at times was, oh, no, gee, that's a bugger.
That's good, neutral.
Or a double bugger. Right? Or I go, oh, no, holy heck. In other words, I step into their kind of validate response space instead of going, oh, my God, why did you do that? I'd go, oh, did you? What? Are you okay? So immediately I'm responding to their, instead of coming from that adult place that says, what on earth were you thinking, which is probably hiding in our brain. And the empathy is linked to that kindness bit. If they're used to being, grounded and gated and punished and lectured to, then you're not really going to be capable of empathy. They want to know, especially if you've got a dad who also made some pretty big mistakes, just make sure they're the ones that are turnaroundable. Every now and then, that's we do these things. And one big one I want to mention here, because it's so important to know this, because we know that boys are wired for more risk for testosterone. But the GABA gets turned off in this window, which is the gamma-aminobutyric acid, which is the impulse-inhibiting neurochemical. So please tell your son that he's kind of like, brake in the fast car is not working. And you need to just remember you've got no GABA. And then what we're going to do next is going to work out how we make everything right again, and how we make it that you've learned that wasn't a good choice. Not you're bad. There's something wrong with you. No, you've made a poor choice, and our job is to help you work out how to make better choices. So what would you do next time? What would you need next time? Let's go through some ideas for that. Let them have, once again, it's when they participate in the overcoming of a hardship or a problem, you are growing their capacity to take that forward in life. And I think one of the challenges, possibly, particularly when we've got neurodivergent kids, is I want to fix everything for them, but they're not learning how to go, I need to work out how to do that myself. So it's a really big one in that space. So empathy is to validate that would have felt awful for you. Oh my God, who was there? What happened? What are the kids? You go into it, and then we come back to, okay, so you've, what are we going to do about it? How are you going to make it right? And then we're going to let's forget about it, because there's going to be more of those. It's a normal part of being a teen.
So much. Like when we go into what were you thinking? It's effectively asking another demand, which is going to get an oppositional response.
And they weren't, right?
Yes. So, okay. So tell me, my last question on communication, how can you give us some practical strategies about maintaining communication with our teens? Because this is, it kind of shuts down. It goes very friends become the priority.
Oh gosh. And it can kind of, a lot of mums go into grieving. Doesn't matter whether you had a great relationship with your daughter or your son, all of a sudden you were just frozen out kind of. And it really hurts. And I'm going to reassure you that, most of the time this is actually developmentally perfect, because they're wanting to become more of their own self, their own autonomy, don't want you to know everything. And one of the keys around communication is that you are always communicating even when you're not talking. So what's your face doing? Are you rolling your eyes? Are you going? They read all the physiology of our body. They also read the tone of our voice and tonality. I can tell you, if you wind your tone back down a little, improves it enormously. And then there's the timing. Again, there are certain times, if they're on their phone, that's just, if they've just got out of bed, most of them not real good at first thing in the morning because of the different shifts in their circadian rhythms. You've got to work out what is a good time. And sometimes, frustratingly, it's just when you want to go to bed, or you're about to leave the house for a meeting, or you're like something and you go, what now? And it's like they want you to be as not distracted as possible. They want your presence. So if you really want to keep those channels up, and there's a whole, there's a whole chapter, a blog on my website about teenage communication. It'll give you lots of, every single one is a little bit different, and we've got to work out what works for each one of us. But the big one is, am I still doing like micro moments of connection? So I'm not saying what's wrong with you. Please work out the words that do not work.
Mm-hmm.
No one wants to hear what's wrong with you. No one wants to be commanded and demanded. You do the dishwasher, it's the third time. No. So if we want the dishwasher done on their day, we might say to them after school, David, it's your turn to do the dishwasher. Do you want to do it now or a little bit later? So where is the autonomy in your communication? And sometimes it's, you just drop these things like, it seems that someone's left the towel on the floor in the bathroom again. I'm just wondering if you can remember to pick it up. So what we do is, it's a slight shift, but it's so much more opening for them to feel less wrong, less bad, less mucked up, letting everyone down, right? And then the other thing is do positive noticing. David, I noticed you put your plate in the dishwasher today. High five, dude. Doom. Right? Whatever it is. And that's why I put so many scripts in the book, because I want to give you the words that allow you to communicate with your teen in a way that makes them feel seen and heard and valued and loved, even if they're forgetful, even if they stink like mad if it's a boy, even if the girl is giving you curry for a whole lot of things, at the end of the day, they still need that safe base to land on. And our capacity to communicate, it's a game changer. And I've had so many parents respond to me saying it's changed the whole way they communicate with their teens. And they're having these really deep conversations with teens now because they're prepared to listen. Whereas before they thought their job was to lecture and tell you what to do. Whereas now the teens are often coming, and wanting a bit of chat about something that's worrying them because they know you've changed the way you communicate, which means I'm now listening before I talk, and I'm prepared to, go, wow, I didn't know that. I'm prepared to ask the questions that say, so there was no vaping when I was at school. So what's all that about? And is that happening much at your school? Because, yeah, and then all of a sudden they actually know more about it than you. So I think that's that challenge going forward. And I think it's the same in the tech space, is that, banning and all those sorts of things, we're doing that to protect younger children because the harm that can happen in that space is quite scary. But our teens, they know how to navigate that space. Some of them have already worked out how to stay safe online. And then we do have some who unfortunately have experienced horrendous bullying online that has ended up in suicide. So we need awkward conversations. You can't have an awkward conversation if you're going to lecture. So if you're going to talk about sex or you're going to talk about, when they're drinking alcohol, you can't do it from the lecture space. You lose them. And they actually want you to be part of that journey going forward where they're making decisions to stand on their own 2 feet so that one day they will leave home with the tools to navigate our crazy world that us grown-ups have created for them.
I love that you really led there a lot of your things with that curious approach, like asking questions, being genuinely curious about, what's going on for them, rather than that old, when I was a kid, it was like, you do it because I told you so.
And the other golden secret, Sharon, is that when you're worried about your teen might be getting stressed about some exams coming up, you don't ask them if they're experiencing it. You say, are any of your friends getting stressed and anxious about the exam? Because it's, and then all of a sudden because they're always more worried about their friends than they are themselves. And they'll go, oh, yeah, I reckon there's a couple of them that, yeah, they really are getting a bit. And then later on, that will ponder in their little head. It's a bit like the golden secret of tell me what if. So, you've had the talk about going to a party or going to the mall on the weekend and what's okay and what's not, but maybe so tell me what you would do if on your trip to the mall a big fight broke out. What would you do at the mall if you got lost? What would you do at the mall if you got lost and you can't find your phone? Or what would you do at the party if a gatecrasher comes? And we listen to them problem solve. And I'm going to tell you 9 times out of 10, they've got most of it already in there. So no wonder they don't want to listen to us to tell them. But we want to help them with the bit they might not have considered, and they're more open to that because we've really heard them.
The power of the prepping conversation. And yes. I think we need to have, I do this in the car, but I think that we need to really highlight what you just said there, because kids with ADHD often get themselves in situations where they haven't visualized, because they don't have executive function or forward planning. They haven't actually visualized what's going to happen when they get to the place. They know, logically they know that they're going and they're going to do the thing, but they don't, when they get there, it's a bit of a shock.
Yes. Or prepping is so important for and it's not lecturing, it's preparing. And it's that predictability that works for little children as well, isn't it? And we'd love them all to have magical experiences, but gee whiz, the world's a bit interesting, isn't it?
It is. So now let's talk about self-esteem, because this is going to be, we couldn't do an episode, talking about your book, Help Me, Help My Teens. We know ADHD has a huge impact on self-esteem. And we know it's one of the most common challenges our teens face, and they're facing it in a way that we've never been exposed to before. No one's navigated what this generation are navigating at the moment. So how can we embrace their strengths and also help them manage the challenges of ADHD, the challenges they're up against?
All right, so the 2 key aspects of a healthy self-esteem, and remember, self-esteem and self-worth are quite different, but self-esteem is that thing that moves all the time, and I think the core underneath it is self-worth is influenced by these 2 as well. So one is self-love and self-appreciation, self-acceptance. And so the more that they are loved and secure by a secure attachment parent or, lighthouse figures or extended family, that's one of the foundations. So the ones that are most unhinged and untethered don't even have that anchor, which is why I'm such a passionate person for exceptional teachers and coaches and people who can be a lighthouse if the parent is not as strong as it needs it to be. So the second thing, though, is self-mastery. So what that means is that you cannot run a story in your head that says you're useless and stupid and dumb if you are really good at one thing. And that minimum of one thing is a bit like it's a bit like a gift in a way, because there's usually something in an ADHD's way. And I look at how many of my boys that were almost illiterate, that were exceptional at sport, one of them failed my English in year 12 right back, in 98, and sold a software company when he was 22. So what is it? And hopefully it's not just gaming and coding. We've got to find something they're good at. So it can be anything from riding mountain bikes, like growing vegetables, breeding ducks. In other words, it's something that they find that stokes what I call the spark. And you'll know when there's a spark because they're alive after they've done it. And wouldn't it be great if every ADHD kid could find that in a school? Every now and then they do, because of all those options. Sometimes there's one that just, this is it. And I had a couple of ADHD kids, one a girl and a boy in different years, who fell in love with clay fun because I had just this fantastic male art teacher who was just so funky and fabulous. And they have gone on with careers in that. And I just think, what is the spark? So for my sons, it became surfing, which meant every weekend, after a full week of teaching, I needed to get out of bed very early and drive around forever finding a wave.
Why do we have to keep driving to look at the waves? I don't understand it.
And I used to grumble for a bit, but what I saw after that were 2 brothers and 3 mates, more alive. And given that I work with, teenagers who were contemplating ending their lives, there was something in that I knew I needed to celebrate. I'd found what that was. And so whatever it is might not be academic, and their school report might be looking really flash, but has your teen got something they love to come home to do that sets them on fire, then they're going to probably be okay, right? Grades do not define our kids. And I think if they can find others with similar interests, that's where we develop that capacity for friendships. And that can, as you know, sometimes be good and a bad thing in adolescence. But I think you go for those 2 things and they'll feel better about themselves because there's at least one thing that they can do amazingly well. And I have had some teen boys who've invited me out to their farm so I could see their new calves that they've helped to breed with their dad. Like I'm standing in cow poop. And this boy is beaming. And my class, he just struggled so much. He just fidgeted so much. He couldn't do anything. He stood taller that day while he showed me the calves that he helped deliver and that he was helping to raise. And I might have had a few tears that day.
That's beautiful. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so we know that, resilience is an important thing in today's world where it's a tough area for our beautiful teens to navigate at the moment. We've got more coming at them, social media and things like that. What are some ways that our parent listeners can help their teens build resilience?
Well, I guess it goes back to that one again, is what can they do for themselves? The more things they do for themselves, the more resilient they become. And also the more, fortunately, they've had a lot of muck-ups. The more they overcome moments of adversity and challenge, the more they fail and go over it, the more they work out how to do things. And that's one of my biggest gripes, as you know, Sharon, is that we change childhood and you have to keep your child happy all the time, or in Zen land, and therefore we change the rules of pass the parcel. And I'm going to say it really does cost our kids later. So I guess there's a little gift that comes with ADHD kids because they're already have all those moments. So they've been adapting to challenge, and that's what it really is how do they adapt? It's not about toughening them up. It is about learning ways of adapting when life doesn't turn up as we want, when we fail, when we break stuff. And I want parents to model it as well. I want you to be the imperfect parent you really are, because none of us is perfect. I want you to go, oh, look, I've just gone and spilt the milk. Oh, jinkies. I think my sons were quite happy with me because I tended to muck up quite a bit. And I remember one day the 14-year-old came in and said, Mum, I just went to get the cheese out of the cheese cabinet in the fridge and I found a light bulb. And he looked at me and he said, so I went to where you put the light bulbs and I found the cheese. Well done, Mum. But I was in perimenopause and he was in the 14-year-old. We didn't have a clue what was going on, but we were able to laugh about it. And like you said before, are they able to come to us and land on us? Because, self-esteem is more about relationships and around us, and resilience is actually the latest definitions, not just about adapting to challenging things. It's about what are the systems that you exist within. So not only families, neighbourhoods, school communities, swim clubs, churches, but within those systems, are there people and resources that you can lean on when something really tough happens? And do you ask for help? So there's the other golden one I gift to your community, that encourage your ADHD child or teenager to go and ask for help, to not be ashamed that they need to ask for help, because that's a massive step forward, particularly for our boys and our men later in life. That's actually one of the biggest steps towards. So build their life skills, encourage them to become more capable at doing things for themselves in a real way. Don't just let them rely on YouTube. As one boy said, Miss, I don't need my dad to teach me how to do things, or my mum, because there's always YouTube. And I said, so what if you lost your phone or it went flat? And he went, oh, good point.
I kind of feel the same way about ChatGPT at the moment. Okay, so let's talk about setting boundaries, because there are some things like in our family, we don't fight every fight, okay? Because if you were to fight every fight,
Totally.
you'd be exhausted. But aggression and swearing is one that I will, with compassion and love, of course. But how do we go about setting boundaries and providing that freedom for teens?
Yeah, it is a really biggie, and I think you've got to have a family meeting around the key boundaries. And that really is, we try not to hurt yourself, you try not to hurt anyone else, and you try not to damage the world around you. They are essentially what we're here for, and that we want our family to be a safe place. They are the kind of overarching guidance in that space. So what happens sometimes, and I know it kind of sounds like a backward step, but I know with my two feistiest sons, that when there was one thing that one of them, it was a very foul mouth. The other was instead of fun punching, he was really punching too hard on his other brother, and he's going, no, it's just normal. And I'm going, no, it's too hard. So I gave them 2 cautions, 2 warnings. And then the third one says, I'm going to actually remove a privilege of yours for a week. So you've got one more warning. If it happens again, I'll remove. So for one boy, I took his surfboard was unavailable for a week. Oh, it was the longest week of my life. And for the other one, no dessert for a week, which might not sound like really serious punishment, but for that boy, it was really serious. And, once again, it was a very long week of being uncomfortable. But during that week, everything else was still the same. I spoke to them the same. I was, I still leapt on them and did silly things. They were just experiencing some discomfort around a privilege. And at the end of that behaviour had changed. So in other words, and it can be that, ADHD kids, same sort of thing. You might need to remind them a few more times in that week, but don't double the punishment. Just stay with the one. It's enough. And if they've really nailed it by day 5, I'd be going in and saying, look, it seems like you've been able to do that. So I'm giving you leave pass on the other 2 days. And sometimes you need to write that in. You need to write it or put it in a visual format, because they'll just forget that amongst everything else they might forget. And you might also, every now and then, if they go towards doing that behaviour, remember just little reminders that are loving and fun. And I, once again, I totally agree with you. You cannot have too many of them because all they feel is like the whole police state is happening. It's not a state where there's love and companionship. We're working together to change one behaviour that is not okay according to the values in your home. Yeah.
And I guess they've got to understand why the boundaries. We're not setting boundaries. Like, I mean, we used to, thinking about parenting styles and the parenting shifts that we've made.
Yes.
We used to have all sorts of boundaries for just, I don't even know why. Like, you've got to sit still at the dinner table. We're sitting still. And then why? Why are we doing that? Like, is it actually worth having the fight over that?
Exactly.
So we've got to really make sure that whatever boundary we're setting, we're prepared to hold, but actually is aligned with what is important to your family.
That's it. And I think anyone who's got ADHD kids will realise sitting still at the dinner table, well, that goes out the window quite early, doesn't it?
Yeah. And who cares?
I know. Are you eating?
Yeah.
I care if you're standing up. No. You're right. And I think sometimes the challenge for parents is what were the rules that were imprinted in you that is how you're supposed to do it. And that's one of the things I think I value your work for, Sharon, because you're helping them to recognise that some of the stories we've got from our own childhoods actually are not necessarily applicable in our homes today, right? However, we still need clear guidelines and clear boundaries that work. And then I'd bring it back to the table again, and I'd say, so, once again, we need the boy that was getting punched to be able to be heard about how much it hurt, because the older boy felt he still wasn't hitting him any hard. It was just the usual punch on the arm. And then those sometimes are really powerful when they hear it in a safe space around, if you can get them at the dining table, always with some food later. Does that make sense? So I think sometimes family negotiations, what do you think we can do to help that work better in our home, and then listen to them problem solve with us? Yeah.
I really like that what we're doing there is we're doing, discussion, but we're doing it as a family. It's not focused on the person that had
on the perpetrator.
Yeah, it's not like
they get that all the time.
Yeah, they get that all the time. They're just going to tune that out if they, so it's like looking at it as a family dynamic, and it's kind of us against the world, like us, our family. We're the central part of this, and we're together as a team.
Yes, it's a team focus, and they. And often I found that the more we focused on, I know it's hard for you at the moment because you have more energy surging through and you're more in need to do stuff and your physicality. So we might have a chat about what can you do with that excess energy? What can you do that can help you bring that nervous system down? What do you reckon? Like, do we get to the skateboard a bit more often, to the track? What do you want to do that might help discharge that? So we actually see it as something that they also going forward in life. And I sometimes look at building sites with, and I sometimes see them. I was once in Melbourne watching these guys at the really, really tall building, washing the windows, and I thought, I reckon I know those boys. They've got so much energy. They love doing dangerous stuff, right? And they're super having fun up there. I know those boys. They were in my Year 9 English class and they didn't like writing stories. I just kind of thought, hang on, we just got to find their place in the world, don't we, Sharon? Yeah. And to be able to use whatever it is that makes our world a better place, and not just hold up a light that the things they can't do in a neurotypical world.
Now, my last question is in line with that parenting shift. So when I started the Functional Family like 7 years ago now, it was all mums. It was all mums, and all my clients, all my marketing was towards mums. And now I'm seeing a shift where we're getting a lot of dads in. And this is so exciting for me. Now, you've got the Good Enough Dad podcast, which I actually love the name. It's kind of in line with the Functional Family, because I wasn't going for the perfect family, the happy family. Yes. I was just going for functional, right, at this point. Tell me a little bit about why you started that podcast and what you've seen, what's the shift that's happening for our men, for our dads?
Well, it's really interesting because I spent so much of my childhood with my dad and not my mum. I can speak both languages. So when I was still in WA, I was doing some suicide prevention work in the wheat belt, and every now and then a community would ask just for me in the shed with 80 or 90 farmers. And I guess that's when they started to see that, you can have this talks about mental health that's not just blaming and shaming and making men feel like they're inadequate, right? It can be empowering. So over the years, I've kind of done some of that. But then the same thing happened when I first started doing the standalone seminars and things. There were no dads. And then gradually they started, especially when I started doing Mothering Our Boys. And so the dads were turning up and going, oh, she really gets boys and she gets men. I'm going to bring my brother along because he's been just a knob at the moment. Like they were actually bringing their friends. They said, she's really funny. Just come because she's funny. And, of course, humour is a huge part of man communication, right? And apparently what that ability to give information, make them laugh and give them pragmatic things to do is the blend. And that so often I was even working in, north of WA with FIFO dads, and I've worked in shearing sheds and I've worked in all sorts of places. I found that after an hour and a half seminar that guys were taking away 3 things that they were going to do. Only 3, which is why they kept coming back, which I thought was kind of sweet too. So when I was running these dads only in Perth, I was selling them out, and it was the feedback that dads were starting to really feel heard and seen. They wanted to be better dads, but their own dad hadn't been, and they didn't really have anything to go by. And that's why when the opportunity came up to do one for dads, they just want to be good enough because there's no perfect. And oh my gosh, I've loved it so much in that how often I cried listening to the raw truth of men because they are wired differently to us, but they want to be equal to, they want to step right in there. And I think I'm super blessed, Sharon, because I'm working on the next season of The Good Enough Dad. And I think it's just a really important space. We need to celebrate. This is one of the best shifts in our Western world, is the step up that we're allowing for our dads to turn up to be, so much more in that space. They're starting to be the dad they yearned for when they were little boys. And that, makes my heart sing.
Me too. That's so inspiring. And I just want to say a big thank you for the work that you do, because it inspires so many. And it's, I don't know if you realize, the impact that you have on the world, because it's giving people practical advice, but in a really palatable, humorous way. We laugh, we cry, we all, all of the things. And I just want to say a big thank you for your time today, for being on the podcast and sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah, and I turned 70 shortly, Sharon, and there's a part of me that looks back going, how the heck did that happen? And I think I had that validated when I was in Vancouver in Canada in April last year, and I'm at the Vancouver Aquarium because I love otters. And a lady reached out with a Canadian accent and said, thank you for saving my life. I have 3 boys. And I looked at her and started to cry, and she looked at me and started to cry. And I walked away, and that was exactly that moment where I thought, how the hell did a little girl on the farm in Wandering in Western Australia end up impacting a lovely mum in Canada? And I just feel incredibly blessed, the journey that I've been on. So thank you, and thank you for all your work. Keep up the good work and go give those boys a big hug, hey.
Oh, thank you, Maggie. Thank you for listening to this episode of the ADHD Families Podcast. If you loved it, please share it on your socials. I want this to start a conversation about ADHD. If you want to make this mum do a little happy dance, please leave a review on iTunes. If you would like to know more about what we do, check out thefunctionalfamily.com. I truly hope that you enjoyed this podcast and you use it to create a wonderful, effective, joyful life with your beautiful children.